Today we're making a waffle in Blender 4 and importing it to Unreal Engine 5 as a game-ready asset. This is aimed at beginners who know the basic interface of both softwares. We will cover basic 3D modeling, UV unwrapping, procedural materials, texture baking the procedural materials, and importing into Unreal Engine. All models and textures used here are free to download from my Gumroad to support the learning process. As a disclaimer, I'm a beginner, so this is more of a cheat sheet for my personal use rather than a comprehensive lecture from a professional. To start, open your default scene in Blender and save your file. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate around the object. If you have a touchpad, use Alt and left mouse button. Use the scroll wheel to zoom in or out. In object mode, press on the object with the left mouse button and press S to scale, and press Z to limit the scaling only to the Z axis. In the bottom left, you'll have additional settings to your scaling. I'm using 0.4 on the Z axis. Left-click the object and go to the top left of the screen to go into edit mode, or press Tab. We are in vertex point selection mode, and top left you can select face selection or press 3 on your numpad. To create the waffle edges, press I to inset the face. I'm using thickness of 0.2. Selecting the inset face, repeat the process, press I and choose 0.2 again. To create the waffle sauce catchers, let's enable the wireframe so we can see how deep we're pushing the waffle. Press G to move the face and press Z to constrict to the Z axis as you're pushing it down. I'll use a value of -0.4. And now let's add more waffleage. Let's exit the wireframe and go to the modifiers tab on the right. To add more waffle per waffle, go into Add Modifier, Generate, Array. By default, it'll add another waffle on the x-axis, which is the red line. Now to duplicate this process, let's add another array, and instead of the x-axis, let's use the y-axis to expand our waffle along the green line. In wireframe mode, you'll see that the waffle is being duplicated 3 more times. I'll go back to the modifiers and make sure that I check the merge options for both of the array modifiers we used. To make sure we don't have any problems with shading, UV unwrapping, or importing into Unreal, I'm going to apply both of the modifiers. By pressing Ctrl A, I'll also apply all the modifications we have done to the cube to make it into a waffle. Our mesh is not perfect, but it's good enough for UV unwrapping, so let's go from a Layout tab into UV Editing tab. If you press on a face in edit mode, it will show you the UV map of that specific face. So make sure you press A to select all the faces and see the whole UV map on the left hand side. On the left, we see the default cube unwrap, which is not correct for a waffle as it has many more dips. So let's select the waffle with A and press U to UV unwrap it again. This is also pretty bad and skewed, so now when you press U, select Smart UV Project to get better results. Create island margins of 0.04 to make sure the color doesn't bleed from one side of the texture to another. Now that we're happy with our UV unwrap, we're gonna use it as a base for our color texture. Now let's create a new image texture. You can use any resolution you need. A 4K texture will capture more details but will be harder to process in games. I'll uncheck the alpha because I do not have any transparencies. The base color is black by default, so we're gonna add color to it in the next steps. Now let's navigate to the Shading tab. The waffle already has a material named Material, so let's rename it to Waffle Color. Now we'll create a procedural material. I'll add a color ramp by pressing Shift A and starting to type Color Ramp. I need the color ramp to create a gradient from a chocolatey brown onto a beige doughy color. However, I want these colors to be linked to the texture coordinates of the mesh in space. Shift A to add texture coordinates. This node gives us all the information about the object. By the way, it also exists in Unreal Engine. If we plug it in directly, it will give us a gradient at an angle, but we want one to go from bottom up. Press Shift A and go for separate X, Y, Z, because the Z axis dictates up and down. As a side note, you can create materials from scratch in Blender and also in Unreal Engine. However, Unreal Engine already needs some PNGs of texture maps to work. Additionally, game engines don't actually like procedural textures too much in terms of processing power, therefore all of this is going to be baked on a PNG later on. You can see me messing around with the colors until I get something I like. So I'm going for a chocolatey brown on the bottom, almost like a chocolate dip, and a waffly texture on top. This texture is procedural because no matter what mesh you apply it to, it's always going to have a chocolate dip at the bottom. In this step, we will bake a simple 3-node procedural material onto a PNG that you can use in your game engine. In the bottom left, make sure you have our waffle color PNG selected or create a new image. This will work with any mesh or procedural material, even from other tutorials. Shift A to add the waffle color image to our nodes. Make sure you select the waffle color in the drop-down. Our goal now is to bake the waffle, so we're going to take the 3 nodes at the top and merge them onto the image on the bottom in waffle color. After the bake, when we plug in the bottom picture, it will give us the same exact result as the top nodes. Under the render settings, change from EV to cycles and change the render to 10 samples. Untick the noise and make sure you're using GPU computing, by the way, otherwise CPU will be frying. Close the samples, navigate down to the bake. Under bake, make sure you're choosing the diffuse, which stands for the color information. Untick direct and indirect lighting to make sure lighting doesn't affect the actual color, unless you're trying to capture some cool lighting effects. Before pressing bake, make sure you have the waffle selected, the waffle color, and you're using the correct settings. If you have the waffle image selected on the bottom left, it will immediately show you the preview of the bake you've just made. Now, if you plug in the image texture into your base color, it should look exactly the same as the node up top. Back in the UV editor, if you have the waffle selected, you can see on the left hand side how the UVs are interacting with the image texture underneath. You may notice some color resolve was spilling, that is why we made some space between the islands before. Now make sure you save your image texture before you exit Blender. In the Layout tab, color preview the waffle to make sure it all looks good before exporting it. Left-click the waffle, go to File and click Export, and export the waffle as an FBX. Open your Unreal Engine project or create a new one. In the Content folder, create a new folder called Waffle. Press Import and navigate to your Waffle FBX file. If you like, you can check Nanite, but under Materials make sure you select the option Do Not Create Material. Press Import. Grab and drag the waffle onto your scene. Congratulations, you're the owner of a 2 meter by 2 meter waffle. You can resize by pressing R or changing the size in Blender. Drag and drop the material texture onto the waffle to create the material automatically. Double-click the material to see how it's set up. As you can see, it's just an image texture plugged into the base color, same as we had in Blender. I hope this basic introduction tutorial was useful and you can now apply this knowledge to more advanced tutorials or add a basic asset to your game. If there is interest, next time I can cover advanced texture baking for ambient occlusion, normal roughness maps. Thanks for watching!